Are you too busy? Too stressed out? Unhealthy? Then this is the place for you. Welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, where we help you create wellness and balance with a holistic approach that will work for you, even with the busiest of schedules, so you can live the life you want. And now, here's your host, Diane Randall.
Financial health is part of balanced living for busy professionals. Today's show talks about investment strategies, financial management, and meeting your lifestyle goals. Today, I have the most amazing guest. He's the winner of the 2015 Plutus Award for the Best Retirement-Focused Blog Podcast. His name is Roger Whitney. The Retirement Answer Man is here. As a financial advisor in 1991, Roger witnessed firsthand the rise and fall of the new economy and the dot-com bubble that ended in 2000. This experience solidified that financial management is about people, not money, and they are served best by their advisors that are fiduciaries to their clients and have the heart of a teacher. And this is why I really love this man. And I've invited him to come on the show for the second time. Hi, Roger.
Woohoo!
Welcome. I tell you, I am so thrilled to be speaking with you again about financial health and lifestyle goals.
It's important stuff. It's good stuff.
It's good stuff. So I just want to jump right in, shall we?
Okay, let's do it.
Well, Roger, since I talked to you in the past, I talked to you last year, I wanted to start 2017 out with a bang. And part of that bang was I'm creating this awesome life that I don't have to retire from. But I had some financial questions on just how do I support this life? And I realized I needed tips on how to align my financial situation to support all these great things that I would like to do without worrying about how am I going to pay my rent? Am I going to have enough money for the future? Will I have to go back to a regular consulting world? So I have to tell you, one of the things I came up with, and I'm going to get a little serious, I have to tell you that I am not comfortable with investing in the stock market. With that said, I wanted you to come on and talk about how does one invest and save for a life they don't have to vacation from and get some kind of return on investment. I want it both ways.
With no risk, right? No risk, all return.
Yeah. Well, very, very little, because part of this is retirement, and I feel this way that as a middle-aged woman, that I don't have the flexibility to lose a lot. You know, I don't have 20 or 30 years to work. I would say that.
Well, see, so that's an interesting, there's so much in that, Diane, to dissect, right?
Okay.
So when I talk about creating a life that you don't want to retire from, a lot of it has to do with thinking about how your life is organized a lot differently, right? Mm-hmm. Retirement, we think of as the beautiful brochures or what our parents did. And the traditional the traditional form of life has been you get educated and then you have this working career and then you retire, right? And a 3-stage life. And there's a great book called The 100-Year Life that just came out that talks about that. The problem with that dynamic is we're living so much longer. And while we're living, we're a lot healthier. And we're spending more money when we are quote unquote retired. So all of a sudden the numbers don't work like they worked for our parents or our grandparents. The numbers just don't work out. So that's why you hear all this stuff about a retirement crisis, savings crisis, is because we're not saving enough. We get told that all the time. And the reason we're told that is because it's still thinking in this antiquated model of education, work, retirement. So when I say, in my mind, when I say create a life you don't want to retire from, it's we have to realize that we'll probably be working longer than our parents did. and, I'm 49, I'll probably have to work and will work into up to 70 or maybe even a little bit beyond. And that sounds at first depressing, doesn't it?
Well, I definitely, especially after you put your kids through college, you realize you have to extend that. But yes, I hear what you're saying because I'm in the same boat. Even though I work for myself, it's how do I extend my income as I age? I want to do all these great things, which I am doing and plan to continue. But how do I keep that going? Because as I get older and I go down my income, I don't know what my income's going to be, but let's say I'm looking at how do I sustain myself financially?
Well, so you still do have to save and invest. I'm not saying that just because we work longer, we don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. We still have to save and invest because at some point we're going to hit that period of time. And you talked about it that, we're going to be older and not able or wanting to work at all.
Exactly.
It'll be longer than, the time frame that our parents or grandparents dealt with. So saving and investing is still an important component of that. And one of the things that you hinted to as well, I don't want to invest in the stock market. So what do I save and invest in?
Right.
Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
So I would take a little bit of issue with being afraid to lose money, which is a phrase you said because of markets and, it feels like the world's, just in turmoil and everything that we're dealing with, that it feels really scary to put any money into those things.
Well, and part of that, Roger, is that I'm older. I'm not able to recoup big losses financially. And that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And I totally get that. Mm-hmm, I'm not that much older. Not that old. But even clients that I work with that are in their 60s, mm-hmm. still the key with investing in those public type of things that can feel real volatile.
Yes.
The key is, and this is where a lot of people make mistakes, is it's like you're trying to climb this huge mountain, but you keep looking at your feet in that it's a very long-term proposition. So unless you have minimum a 5-year time frame until you would ever touch that money, you shouldn't invest in the stock market, because it is just, if your time frame is anywhere less than 5 years, then it doesn't make sense because it is so volatile. But, say if someone's 60 years old, the monies that are committed to those types of things would be really money that's meant for 10, 15, or 20 years down the road. Mm-hmm. Where it's not as risky historically if you expand the timeframes. The averages have a chance to average out, and that will help you keep up and hopefully surpass inflation. But I think you do make a good point. Most financial advisors, they're trained as investment people first. So everything is an investment solution. Invest in the markets, right?
Right.
And I think there are a lot of other things that you, Diane, and me, and everybody else can invest in that doesn't have anything to do with the markets. And so what would those be? One, there's, direct real estate, buying rental houses and things like that. That could be part of it. I think another part would be investing in ourselves in a couple different areas. A lot of times that's where we'll have the biggest return on investment, is investing in ourselves, because we're living so much longer, the skills we have decay over time because innovation replaces things. And I think that's a place where we can continually up our game in terms of the skills that we have to offer that fit where we're at in their stage in life. And when I work with clients, it's not that they want to retire and do nothing. Usually it's they're in a 9-to-5 grind in a corporation or in some other position that they just want freedom from. They want some more control, right?
Yes, that is absolutely true.
And so this is the perfect time to, it could be the perfect time once the kids are gone and that role has started to wind down, that you simplify your life, but then you start to reimagine what it is you want to be doing. Because a lot of us, you tell me if you agree, we sort of fall into our careers after college or whatever. It just sort of happens. It's not some grand plan. And when we're more mature in our 40s or 50s, that's when, we know what God granted us gifts in, and we know what we enjoy and where we think we can add value. And a lot of times it's not in the position that we're in.
Exactly, because the first time out the gate is security. You know, most of us, I know I was told I have to get serious about my life, which means I need to make enough money, do something serious so that I can take care of myself.
Right. And then, so you get that job and you start making money. And then by the time you realize, wow, this isn't really what I was called to do, by the time that comes around, usually what happens is we have a mortgage, we have kids, and maybe we're married. Now we're sort of not trapped in a bad way, but we're trapped in, we can't start over because I have these obligations. So I think one area you can invest in outside of the markets is, especially if you're in this time frame that we're talking about, is reimagining. Well, one, simplifying your life because the kids are gone. And then reimagining, what kind of work could I do that I really enjoy that will give me some more control over my time, so I can have the best of both worlds. Because there's a lot of really good things about working and earning an income, from a socialization and mental engagement and everything else. So it's a lot of times it's, okay, how much money do we take to reinvest in ourselves to pursue some things, or build a network, or build the skills to do something that is really in our sweet spot?
I love that. That is so right on.
And then the last one I'll say, investing in yourself, and this may sound sort of silly, but it's a really important one. And that is investing in our health and in our relationships as early as we can. Because there's a secret about that. And there's actually a return on investment in real dollar terms, but there's also a real return on investment from a quality of life perspective, because here's what's going to happen, Diane. We're all going to live a lot longer than most other generations, or any other generation. The secret is, if you don't invest in your health and your relationships, you'll probably live almost as long as if you did. It's just going to suck, relatively speaking.
And that's because you're paying for medicine, you're paying more for your health.
If you don't, exactly. Well, from a financial perspective,
we have to pay more. And the sicker you are, the more you have to pay. And I'm learning this not only from my clients, but from my parents and my friends.
And from a qualitative standpoint.
Yes.
It would be nice to be able to go for a walk when you're 70 and feel better about it, and to be able to participate in life. And even from a relational perspective, investing in your relationships, because as we grow older, quality relationships really is the big thing about quality of life. A lot of times, studies show anyway, is as we grow older, if we don't have good quality relationships, our quality of life is going to be a lot less. And if you want to blow up a financial life, especially for a couple, get divorced when you're 50 or 60 and have your assets halved. So there are all these areas outside the markets that really can help in this equation that a lot of us don't think about.
Well, you have us thinking now. And I hear what you're saying. So what 3 keys to better communication can you give us about life and money, so we can start 2017 off with a lot of the insight that you've given us around looking at our financial health?
So here's how I approach it. So I'm going to talk about little conversations, and I'll start with a quick story. So I am 49 years old, just celebrated our 26th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And I always tease people and ask them, what's the secret to a good marriage? And then I always tell them my secret. And I say my secret to a good marriage is I never want to have a big conversation with my wife. If I can avoid big conversations where something was left unsaid and then it festered in resentment or whatever built up, then that becomes a big conversation and those are uncomfortable. But if we can have little conversations so we're always in tune with each other, even little conversations, because the problem with little conversations, they could be not good ones where, like I had one the other day with my wife because I shared something on the podcast that she wished I would not have.
Okay, tell us. Tell us what you said.
Well, so I weaved it into a really good story. I shared something that she does that annoys me.
Okay.
And I weaved it into if she predeceased me, if she passed away, I would probably miss that quirky thing that annoyed me because it was uniquely her.
Right.
So I tried to weave it into a good place. But I went downstairs after I'd recorded the episode. I said, "Hey, honey, I just talked about you on the podcast." And I told her what I said. And then she just sort of looked at me and then she walked away. I'm like, oh, I could tell she wasn't happy. Well, she wasn't upset, but she wasn't happy.
Right.
But then she came back like maybe 2 minutes later and she said, honey, please don't talk about that kind of stuff anymore on the show. And then I'm like, okay, I get it. I won't. So that's a really good example of a sort of uncomfortable, but great little conversation, because if she had not come back, that she could have just let that fester.
Yes.
And it could have grown with some other things, and it could have come out in passive aggressive ways to me, which means I probably would have retaliated in the same way. And Lord knows where that goes. Well, it's the same thing with money and with how we manage our financial life. You know, when we look way far off, we just can't figure it out. The future is unknowable, not just in the markets, but in our life circumstance. So what I do with my clients and what I suggest people do is you set up little conversations that you just have repeatedly so you can just make lots of little adjustments as your life unfolds. So those little conversations really quickly. One is, what are the things we want to accomplish over the next year or even the next 6 months? You want something with an end goal in sight that you can actively work towards. And then you want to have, and that will be very much in sharp focus, right?
Right.
It's hitting the finish line and giving yourself a pat on the back. And you can do that from a financial perspective or professional development perspective. And then where do you want to be roughly in 3 years? So it'll be a little out of focus, but it's the general direction that you're walking. And then you want to have that big dream that's more out of focus, but that's the big goal ultimately. You want to have that conversation every 6 months together if you're married, so you can be in agreement of where you're trying to go as a family long term, but what the bogey is for this year. That's the first conversation. And then the second conversation is managing your cash flow. You know, I'll use the B word, okay?
Yeah.
And controlling spending is super important. But a good friend of mine, Paula Pant, gave me a great phrase that I totally stole, but I give her credit for it, is there's only so much frugaling you can do, right? I mean, cutting the cable bill will move the dial a little bit, but it's not going to get you to the promised land. I think yes, we have to control the spending side of it, but where I think people spend too little time is how can we increase our income? If you can increase your income, that can really move the dial big time. And that could be becoming an A player at work. It could be investing in your professional network so opportunities can be exposed to you. It could be increasing your skill set so you're more marketable. A combination of things, or it could be the entrepreneurial end of it. Yeah. It doesn't have to be, but it could be.
Creating that passion that you have inside of you, turning that into some type of work.
Yes, exactly. Now, there are some people that have no entrepreneurial spirit at all, which I think is actually okay.
Right.
Because it's a different kind of path. But within your company, you could become that indispensable person. And you can set goals of, okay, how am I going to do this? What skills do I need? How do I network with the right people so they notice me? Because, if you do an amazing job, but you don't have the right people notice you, then the opportunities aren't going to come to you. So part of that little conversation is identifying the risks in your income, but also where the opportunities are to be able to increase it. And I don't think enough people do that. We think about budget. And budget, you can't move the dial big. If you cut your spending by 20%, that's not near as impactful as increasing your income by 20%.
Yeah, and I'm glad you are laying this out in detail, because a lot of people, at least the people that I talk to, some of them feel that being more valuable at work means you're working longer hours.
Well, it's all a trade-off. It could be that you see a position that's parallel where there's a little bit more work-life balance. and you position yourself to go over to that direction. Or it could be, I mean, I remember speaking with a gentleman maybe 2 months ago where just because of who he knew, because of how he had built his professional network, he got offered a position in the exact same position that he was doing now, but he made like 30% more. Just because the company really needed that position. And you need to know the people that are in whatever industry that you do, because that wasn't something that he went and applied for. It was because of, hey, John, I heard my company needs this. You do this. You're awesome. And they connected the people together. So there are a lot of things that you can do. And it really depends on what your spirit is. Some people are great networkers. For me, I'm not a great networker. So I do a podcast. I become a thought leader in my area because I'm horrible at networking. So, and some people are horrible at podcasts. So maybe they write blogs, maybe they write articles. You got to figure out what your lane is rather than trying to find a lane that might not be perfect for you.
Right, so that you can just make the right decisions for your own life. And one that feels good for you in terms of allowing you to do your best in whatever you choose to
right. It's got to be authentic.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Because, if you've ever been to a chamber meeting and everybody's handing out business cards, I never felt very authentic in that environment.
Well, and I am not the Chamber of Commerce person either. I like targeting people who I call my tribe, people that are in the space of what I love to do and where I want to be and where I want to go. So I found that my, workshops and getting out and communicating with people, doing the podcast, talking to my market, people that are busy in their lives, helps me to not have to show up in that way, because as you said, that's very inauthentic to me. I don't even feel comfortable doing that.
Right. So, but other people might, and that's good.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good for them. I mean, the point is we have to figure out what's best for us. Like you said, what's most authentic.
Exactly. And then the final talk is your balance sheet. Now, I think everybody should keep a net worth statement, which is basically a statement that shows on one piece of paper listing all of your assets, all the accounts and cars and houses you own, and then all your debts. And then you add up your assets and you add up your debts, and then you subtract the debts from the assets, and that is your net worth. And that's where you deploy your capital, the money that you earned that wasn't going towards lifestyle. That's your dashboard. And this is exactly what a company would do. Mm-hmm. How do I deploy this money to work towards these goals and dreams that I've outlined in step one? And then you make those decisions, and then you just keep repeating these little conversations so you can make lots of little adjustments along the way. So it's really a never-ending process.
Sounds like it. So as you wind down your career, and when I say wind down, maybe your work is not as demanding and therefore your income has been reduced because you are choosing, let's say you're getting older and you're choosing to wind your life down. And that includes everything, even the hours.
Right.
How do you look at that balance sheet and see that everything is being taken care of from a financial standpoint? So are you saying that when you're really ramped up in your work and in your money and in your life, is that when you lay things out? Because if I'm a speaker and let's say fast forward 20 years, I'm not making that much money. It's mostly doing it because I love it.
Right. Well, you got to plan for it, right? You have to slowly position yourself and do the analysis to know that the path you're walking on is realistic. And that's basically what I do for a living. I mean, I only work with people over 50 and I work with them when they're at that stage of life that they are winding down their professional career and they're trying to figure out what lifestyle is sustainable and what they need to do to position themselves to manage that cash flow in retirement. And it ain't easy because they're so, it's such a long future. So it's a never ending process. So example, when we get through the process and they'll say, okay, we have goals that we know are realistic and they're achievable, and we have some good comfort that they were confident that you can achieve them. And, and then we're starting to implement all the action items from that. Mm-hmm. One of the last conversations I have with them, and let's say it was you, Diane, I'll say, okay, Diane, now this is great. We're going to start walking this direction. And we have high confidence that this is achievable. But just because today that is true, it doesn't mean, and I'm not saying this is the bad thing, but I use it for effect, is it doesn't mean when you're 70 or 80, you might not have to live in a trailer.
Okay.
And I say because yes, the markets could go directions. Everything could go against us. It could be the markets and the economy go totally off kilter. Inflation goes through the roof. Plus your expenses, health expenses, whatever, things go totally wrong in your life as well.
Right.
All these things could lead us there anyway. But if you're having the little conversations, you're going to be making so many little adjustments along the way in managing through it and mitigating as your path unfolds, that it's never going to be that big a deal because you're on top of it. Where it really becomes a big deal, and this is what most people do because they neglect the little conversations, is they lead a life, the situation changes, whether it's in the markets or in their life, and they don't make any adjustments. And all of a sudden that's a big conversation. That's a guy in a car about to go over a cliff. And now you're moving from the super nice house to the trailer. You never made any little adjustments.
Got it.
So that's really the best that we can do is be on top of it and just navigate as our life unfolds.
And just like you said, pay attention to the little things that unfold in your life. For example, if it's health, your health changes, then in that moment or in that time frame, we have to readjust what that means financially. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, exactly. And it's little adjustments. And you make those all the time. But the key is you have to have the framework to have the right conversations. And that's basically what I do is I provide the framework. I make sure the conversations happen and I facilitate them. And I've walked the journey so many times before that I know where some of the dead ends are.
And I want to thank you for sharing that with us. So how can people find you, the listeners, to connect with you?
The best way to find me is listening to the Retirement Answer Man podcast, where I noodle on this stuff and how to create a great life every week.
Awesome. Roger's information will be in the show notes for this episode. And also, Roger, I want to thank you so much for your expert advice, your wisdom, and your humor as well.
Okay.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you and get your advice. It's certainly very progressive advice, which last time you were here, that show attracted so many people. I had so many friends and family members saying, I've never looked at my financial health in that way. So I'm just so thankful that you opened our eyes and the listeners' eyes to another way to thinking about financial health.
Yeah, well, I totally think we can thrive in that later part of life. I think we just need to figure out how to thrive outside the lines a little bit.
And I certainly see that as a possibility for me in the future. It's exciting to think about it.
Well, thanks so much, Diane. I'm glad I enjoy the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roger. And thank you for listening to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. And if you have any comments or questions about the show today, please leave a comment on the Balanced Living for Busy Professionals website or send me an email at feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com.
Thank you for listening to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This podcast is sponsored by DianeRandallConsults.com. If you like this show, the best way to support it is by leaving 5-star feedback on iTunes. And please feel free to email your questions, comments, and suggestions to feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com. Until next week, namaste.